The town of Ridge Hollow had always treated Dawn like a fragile secret, until the morning 9-year-old Aria Collins stepped onto the cracked sidewalk, clutching a worn chalk stick and a leash that ended at the quietest German shepherd anyone had ever seen. Kyle didn't bark, didn't tug. He just watched the rising sun as if searching for orders painted in the light. What the townsfolk didn't know, couldn't know, was that a single hand signal from Aria could turn the dog into either a velvet-pawed guardian or a living shield against nightmares. And nightmares were coming. On this particular sunrise, while church bells yawned awake and gas pumps clicked like tired metronomes, a distant rumble of motorcycles fractured the calm. To most, it sounded like weekend travelers. To Kyle, it was a code red delivered on exhaust fumes. As the rumble drew closer, Aria's chalk broke against the pavement, sketching an unfinished bridge that would soon decide who lived to cross it. Before the first engine turned the corner, Kyle lifted his head, amber eyes igniting with purpose, and Ridge Hollow's quiet secret prepared to speak in paw prints louder than any siren. The morning light came gently through the curtains, soft and golden, painting the walls of Aria's room in warm hues. Outside, the first birds had just begun to sing, but inside, everything was still. Still except for Kyle. The German shepherd stirred from his post at the foot of her bed. He rose without a sound, stretched, and padded over to where the girl lay curled on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the other lightly gripping the edge of her blanket. Kyle didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just placed his chin on the mattress and waited. Her eyelids fluttered slow, measured. Then, with a grace that only Kyle seemed to understand, she lifted her hand and tapped her fingers twice against the pillow. That was his signal. Kyle let out a slow exhale, more breath than sound, and pressed his nose into her palm. She smiled, a closed-lip smile, quiet but bright, wordless. Everything about their mornings was wordless but full. Aria was 9 years old, her mind a maze of patterns and sensitivities, colors too bright, sounds too sharp, routines that meant everything. She'd been diagnosed with high-functioning autism when she was 3, and while her speech was limited, her perception was not. Her world thrived in gesture, in rhythm, in ritual, and Kyle was her mirror. They moved together like a pair trained for war. She swung her legs over the bed, and Kyle backed up a step, giving her room. She pointed once toward the dresser. Kyle trotted over and sat facing it, as if guarding the tiny drawer she'd soon open to select her socks. Downstairs, the scent of brewing coffee drifted upward. Gabriel Collins, her father, stood in the kitchen frying eggs with mechanical precision. His posture was rigid even in his worn cotton t-shirt. His hair, military short, always had started to gray at the temples. His left hand stirred the pan while his right clenched briefly, then released. A tic born not from impatience, but from memory. On the fridge, a photo remained untouched. A woman with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun, a bright smile under desert sun, sunglasses resting on her collar, a military K9 at her side. Elena, Gabriel's late wife, Aria's mother, Kyle's original handler. The pan sizzled too loud. He turned the heat down. Footsteps padded down the stairs in a slow, even rhythm. 2 soft steps, a pause, then another. Aria appeared at the threshold of the kitchen, Kyle a shadow at her heel. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her father gave her a nod, a silent, "Good morning," and she walked straight to the breakfast nook where her cereal bowl already sat, aligned perfectly with the placemat that bore her mother's initials in faded embroidery. Kael curled up at her feet like a sentinel taking position. "Eggs today?" Gabriel asked, but his voice carried no expectation of a reply. She nodded once, then held up 2 fingers, sunny side up. He smiled faintly. "You got it, Chef." The fork-to-plate sounds, the hum of the fridge, even the birds outside the noise didn't bother her today. Not with Kael beside her. He had a way of absorbing the static, of grounding her. Gabriel had seen it time and again, the way she'd tense during thunderstorms until Kael pressed his side to hers, and everything in her body would relax like a switch had flipped. Some kind of unspoken signal passing between them, soldier to soldier. As she ate, she kept glancing at the framed photo near the window. Her mother, once again. This one was from a base in Kandahar. Kael was just a pup then, his ears too big for his body. Elena knelt beside him, mid-laugh, the desert wind lifting strands of her hair across her face. Arya reached out, traced the glass lightly with her fingertips. Gabriel caught the motion. His breath hitched, but only for a second. He cleared his throat, took another sip of coffee, and set the pan in the sink. "She would have loved this morning," he said softly, looking out the window. "The quiet, the light, the way he always watches you." Arya didn't look up. She touched her chest with 2 fingers, then pointed to Kael. "He knows," Gabriel said. A silence fell over the kitchen, thick but not heavy. The kind of silence that held more than absence. It held memory. It held love. Kael perked his ears at the sound of the mail truck outside, but didn't move. Only when Arya tapped her thigh did he rise, standing tall. She walked to the door and opened it. 3 steps. Just enough to retrieve the small bundle of mail and retreat. Kael followed, and then resumed his place by the table. Gabriel watched them both. There were days he still woke in the middle of the night, half expecting Elena's side of the bed to be warm. Some mornings he imagined hearing her boots on the stairs, her voice calling Kael for drills. But they were gone, those sounds. What remained was Arya, and Kael, and this fragile, unspoken structure of survival. He rinsed his hands and looked over at his daughter. She was humming softly, something low and rhythmic, more vibration than tune. Kael pressed against her legs, eyes closed, ears alert. His tail thumped once against the floor. That sound, just that made Gabriel close his eyes. For one moment, the ache in his chest softened. Tomorrow might bring a storm. He didn't know it yet, but the calm would shatter. Violence would come in the most unexpected of places. But for now, in this sliver of morning, there was Kael. There was Arya. There was peace. And for Gabriel Collins, that was enough to keep breathing. The cemetery sat on a quiet hill just outside town, where the wind moved through the trees like breath through bone. Gabriel stood still before the granite stone, his posture as rigid as it had been the day he'd buried her Elena Collins, Sergeant First Class, K-9 Unit Commander, decorated twice for valor. There were no flowers today. Elena never liked them in life, said they were just colorful distractions from the work. So instead, he brought her something else, her old K-9 patch, weathered and faded, edges frayed from years of field use. He pressed it gently into the grass beneath her name. "Still holding the line," he muttered. "Just not the way you planned." The wind carried his words away. He didn't kneel. He couldn't. Something in his knees locked up every time he came here, as if bending would break something he'd never be able to fix again. So he stood, soldier straight, husband hollow. "She'd be proud of you," the voice came softly. Reverend Myers, white-haired and warm-eyed, approached with his hands folded before him. Gabriel nodded but didn't look away from the stone. She'd be more proud of Kyle, of Arya. She's in both of them, the Reverend said. You know that. But Gabriel wasn't sure. Not always. Elena had been fire and steel lightning in uniform. Arya was different. She was silence wrapped in rhythm, a soul that spoke in motion and not in words. He wondered sometimes if his daughter had gotten more of Elena than he'd ever see. He left after 10 minutes, like always, just long enough for the guilt to start whispering and short enough not to listen. Back at the house, Arya sat cross-legged on the living room floor, Kyle beside her like a sentry. The TV screen flickered with old footage, grainy, sun-bleached recordings taken from a GoPro clipped to Elena's vest. The footage showed a younger Kyle, barely a year old, lunging over a wall, following commands with machine precision. Elena's voice called out sharp, clear. "Advance! Pivot left! Good boy! Stay sharp!" Arya's eyes didn't blink. She watched the footage with the kind of focus only she could sustain, her breath in sync with the dog's movements, her fingers twitching every time Kale in the video made contact. It was almost like she was in the frame with them, chasing something only she could see. Gabriel paused at the doorway watching them, his daughter and the ghost of his wife woven together through a flickering screen and a breathing dog. Kyle gave a small huff, barely audible, then looked back at Arya. She reached out and pressed her palm gently against his chest, right over the old scar that still traced a memory of war across his fur. Her hand lingered, then slid upward to his collar, where a worn tag still hung. Elena's initials were engraved on the back. She pressed her forehead to Kyle's and closed her eyes. Kyle didn't move, didn't blink. Gabriel finally stepped forward, kneeling beside her. "How long's he been there with you?" "Since I woke up," she whispered. It was rare for her to speak without being prompted. He noticed the tremble in her voice, not fear, but weight, like each word had to travel through a corridor of emotion before reaching daylight. He looked at the screen. Elena was laughing now, running through a muddy training field, her boots kicking up water. Kyle barked and chased her. She turned suddenly, threw her arms wide, and shouted, "Boom! Gotcha!" The screen froze. Arya had paused it. Her finger hovered over Elena's frozen expression, a moment of light and life caught between seconds. Her lips were parted mid-laugh, her uniform soaked, her eyes wild with joy. "I miss her," Arya said. Gabriel swallowed. "So do I." "Kyle remembers." He nodded slowly. "He does." Arya stood and walked to the window, her hands wrapped around her sleeves like anchors. Kyle followed a few steps behind but stopped short, as if giving her space was also part of the code he knew by heart. "Sometimes," she said, still looking out the glass, "when I dream, it's her voice I hear, telling me how to breathe, like she's still training me." Gabriel felt his throat tighten. He moved beside her but didn't touch her, just stood shoulder to shoulder, both staring at nothing. "She trained Kyle to protect you," he said quietly, "to stay beside you when the world felt like too much." Arya nodded. "He knows when it hurts before I do." "Yeah," Gabriel said. That was her gift. She trained instincts. They stood there a while, just breathing in the room she once filled. Outside, the sky had started to turn the soft gray of early dusk. In the distance, a hawk let out a cry. Kale's ears flicked once, but he didn't move. "You're strong, Arya," Gabriel said after a pause. "Stronger than I ever was." "No," she whispered. "I'm just holding on." Kael came forward, nudging her hand with his nose. She leaned into him, eyes damp now. "I don't like when she fades," she murmured. Gabriel's voice cracked. "She's never gone. Not really." Outside, wind stirred the old wind chime Elena had once hung on the porch. It sang a haunting, gentle melody, familiar, yet always different, like Elena's laugh, like memory. And as the room grew quiet again, the only sound was the steady thump of Kael's tail against the floor. The gas station sat on the edge of the highway like a forgotten relic-chipped paint, a broken ice machine, and the scent of stale oil clinging to the air. Gabriel always chose this one. Quiet. Familiar. Just enough space for Kael to stretch while Arya stood close under the shade of the canopy. Predictable. Safe. But that morning, something felt wrong before he even stepped out of the truck. The low rumble of engines wasn't just passing noise, it was circling. He parked beside Pump 4, glancing instinctively at the rearview mirror. Arya was still tracing her fingers along Kael's spine in the back seat, eyes locked in that trance she fell into when the world felt too loud. Kael's ears twitched. His body had already gone rigid. "Stay in the truck," Gabriel said calmly. He stepped out, letting the door shut with a soft thud. The pumps hissed with their usual indifference, but the sound of the engines grew louder, closer. 1, 2, 5 of them at least. Then they emerged. The Steel Vultures. A name carved into leather and stitched into the very bones of local rumors, came rolling into the lot like thunder in slow motion. Their bikes were matte black and bone-colored chrome, some with war paint decals, others with blood-red streaks. At the center of them rode a man larger than the rest. Rafe Maddox. Gabriel felt the recognition slice through him like shrapnel. Time hadn't dulled Rafe's frame or fury. His face was still half-shadowed by that greasy mane of dark hair, eyes sharp and suspicious beneath aviators. Tattoos crept up his neck like poison ivy. The bikes cut off all at once. Silence. Rafe removed his glasses. His eyes locked on Gabriel. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered with a slow grin. "Didn't think I'd ever see your face again, Captain." Gabriel didn't flinch. "It's just Gabriel now." "Funny," Rafe said, dismounting. "I still see the guy who sent my little brother off to war and forgot to bring him back." Kael had already exited the truck. The door hadn't made a sound. But there he stood, between Arya and the unfolding threat. His stance was solid. Head lowered, body coiled, silent and alert, like a drawn bowstring. His eyes didn't leave Rafe. Arya stood behind him, pressed against the truck door, her small fingers buried in Kael's fur. She didn't speak, but her presence, fragile and unshaking, changed everything. Gabriel's voice dropped an octave. "There's a child here." Rafe's smile flickered. One of the other biker's tattooed knuckles, gold tooth snorted. "Didn't think you were the daddy type." "I'm not," Gabriel said. "I'm just trying to keep what's left of her safe." Kael let out a low growl, so deep it barely registered in the air, but sent a visible ripple through the men standing closest. The kind of growl that said, "Don't make me repeat myself." Rafe's hand hovered near his belt, not on a weapon, not yet. Just a gesture. A warning. "You know," Rafe said slowly, circling a few steps, "when my brother came back in pieces, I asked who gave the order that got him pinned down without evac. You know what name came up?" Gabriel didn't answer. "You," Rafe hissed. I gave the orders to save more than just him, Gabriel said quietly. I did what I had to. Spoken like a man who got to walk away whole. Cale bared his teeth. Rafe glanced at him with a sneer. This the mutt from the papers? The ghost dog? Gabriel took a step forward. That's not a mutt. That's Cale. He's the reason my daughter sleeps through the night. Rafe stared at Cale. Cale stared right back, still as stone, but dangerous in every line of muscle and stare. Then, slowly, Rafe raised both hands in mock surrender and stepped back. You're lucky she's watching, he said, nodding at Arya. Otherwise, this'd go different. Gabriel didn't respond. He simply held the stare solid, unmoved. Rafe turned toward his crew. Let's roll. They revved their engines again, sharp and sudden, making Arya flinch, but Cale didn't move, not even a blink. As the steel vultures pulled away, Gabriel exhaled slowly, only now realizing how tight his chest had become. He walked over to Arya, crouching beside her. She hadn't cried. She never did not in front of strangers, but her hands were trembling. Are you okay? He asked softly. She nodded, then touched Cale's ear, whispering something only the dog could hear. Cale leaned into her. Gabriel glanced toward the road, watching the cloud of dust the gang left behind. His jaw clenched. That wasn't just a run-in. That was a warning. He opened the truck door and helped Arya inside, Cale jumping in right after and settling into his protective position beside her. She leaned into his side without a word, still gripping his collar like a lifeline. Gabriel closed the door and slid into the driver's seat. The keys shook slightly as he turned the ignition. Looks like ghosts don't stay buried long, he murmured. And with that, they pulled back onto the Highway 3 silhouettes against the rising heat, bound together by silence, memory, and the scent of something terrible on the wind. The sun bled over the jagged ridgelines like an open wound, staining the horizon in hues of copper and ash. Heat shimmered off the dirt. The outpost fob Sabre was half dismantled, waiting for a rescue that was hours late and hope that was running thin. Captain Gabriel Vance crouched behind a crumbled Hesco barrier, his rifle slung but ready. Dust clung to his face, mixing with sweat and the faint sting of dried blood near his temple. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just listened. The comm crackled again. Blackbird 6, this is Reaper Command. Extraction bird rerouted ETA unknown. Hostiles converging from East Valley. Do you copy? Gabriel closed his eyes for a beat. Then, copy that. We'll hold as long as we can. Behind him, the triage zone was barely functioning, just shade tarps and morphine. There were 7 wounded, 2 critical, including Corporal Ezra Maddox, the youngest in the unit, barely 22, with a crooked smile and a photo of his brother taped inside his helmet. Gabriel had seen it once. They looked nothing alike, but the loyalty? The way Ezra talked about Rafe like he was a god carved from leather and smoke that stayed with him. Now Ezra was lying on a stretcher, both legs torn by shrapnel, unconscious but alive. "Sir," said Lieutenant Park, rushing over, helmet askew, "we've got movement in the ravine, half a click, maybe less." Gabriel looked out. Dust trails, dozens, ambush. He turned to the team medic, Sergeant Deeks, who was crouched over Ezra. "Can he be moved?" Deeks shook his head grimly. "Not without losing him." Gabriel's hand hovered near his radio. The sound of gunfire echoed faintly in the distance, sharp, intermittent. The kind of sound that came just before it closed in for good. Then the voice of Cale's handler, Elena Reyes, came over comms. "Blackbird, this is Ghost Mother. I'm inbound with Cale and flank security. 10 mics out." Gabriel exhaled. That voice had always steadied him, even before they fell in love, even before the world back home began to make sense again. Elena was bringing Cale. That meant a chance. "Copy that, Ghost Mother," he said. "Get here fast." Seconds later, the sound of incoming rotor blades cut through the desert wind. The evac chopper, a Black Hawk, swept in over the ridge like a promise. It hovered low, kicking up a cyclone of sand and grit as soldiers sprinted toward it carrying the most critical wounded. But everything went sideways in a heartbeat. A rocket-propelled grenade burst from the east, striking the rear rotor. The chopper shuddered, twisted violently, and dropped behind the ridge with a scream of metal. Silence. Then fire. Gabriel didn't move. His mouth was dry. The evac was gone. "Sir!" Park's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Gabriel made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We carry who we can. We leave defensive positions and retreat west. Cover fire as we move." He turned to Deeks, eyes sharp. "Tag Maddox. Stay with him. If I can, I'll come back." But the medic hesitated. "Sir, we won't get another shot." Gabriel didn't answer. He looked down at Ezra unconscious, whispering something in a fever dream. Then he ran. The report would later call it an operational fallback under extreme hostile duress. But Gabriel remembered it as one thing, leaving a soldier behind. Ezra woke up in a field hospital 3 days later, legs gone, lungs burned, with no family by his side. No Rafe, just silence. When he asked about the others, no one would tell him what really happened. Back in the U.S., Gabriel wrote a letter, 6 pages, front and back to Rafe Maddox. He never sent it. Instead, he visited Elena's grave 2 weeks later, a folded flag under one arm, Kyle's leash in the other. The war had ended in pieces. Back in the present, Gabriel jerked awake in his chair at the kitchen table, hand still gripping the chipped coffee mug. His heart was racing. Kyle padded over silently, resting his head against Gabriel's arm, sensing the storm inside him like he always did. Gabriel exhaled. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered, voice cracking. He wasn't supposed to be left there. Kyle didn't move, just stayed with him. Outside, the wind picked up. The past wasn't done. And somewhere out there, Rafe Maddox was still waiting for an answer to a question that Gabriel had never had the courage to face. "Why didn't you bring my brother home?" A remote scrapyard on the outskirts of Ridge Hollow. The place looked like it had given up long ago. Burnt-out trailers leaned against piles of rusted metal, and the twisted bones of old motorcycles littered the cracked earth like war relics. Above the main shack, a weather-warped sign read, "Red Vulture Salvage, no entry, no mercy." Inside, a circle of men surrounded a table cluttered with bike parts, knives, empty beer cans, and a single photo-creased, sun-bleached, trembling slightly beneath a box fan. The photo showed a young soldier in fatigues, flashing a grin, helmet crooked. Ezra Maddox. And next to it, a folded article clipped from a base newsletter. Captain Gabriel Vance, awarded Bronze Star after evac operation. Rafe Maddox stood in the center of the room, knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. The scars across his forearms were old, but the way he traced them with his thumb felt fresh like reopening wounds no one else could see. 8 years, Rafe said, voice a low growl. 8 years I waited for anyone to explain what happened to my brother. No one answered. His gang, the Steel Vultures, shifted uncomfortably, thick arms crossed, tattoos creeping up their necks. They weren't used to Rafe's quiet. He was all fire most days, all roar and rage. But tonight was different. Tonight it felt like the silence before something split open. "You know what they told me?" Rafe asked. "They told me Ezra was lucky to come back at all. Lucky, after dragging his body across the sand like some forgotten dog. Lucky, even when the only thing they handed me was a bill for his rehab and a thank you card." A few men muttered under their breath. Then, with slow precision, Rafe reached into the cooler and pulled out a beer. He didn't drink it, just stared at the label, turning it in his hand like it might change shape. His eyes were bloodshot, not from alcohol, but from memory. "I saw him last week," he said. "He sat in that chair, the same one he's been stuck in for almost a decade, and said, 'I still don't know why he left me.'" Rafe crushed the can in one motion. "I do," he hissed, "because Vance thought Ezra wasn't worth the wait." A long silence followed, then a voice from the shadows near the back of the room. "What are you thinking?" The man stepped forward slowly, tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and sharp eyes that missed nothing. His name was Diesel. No one knew if it was his real name or just what stuck after a decade of black ops and backroom jobs. He was the tactician, the thinker. If Rafe was fire, Diesel was ice. "Same thing I've always thought," Rafe said. "An eye for an eye." Diesel folded his arms, gaze hard. "You're talking about going after a man with military training, a man with a kid, and a trained dog." Rafe's eyes narrowed. "Don't forget who trained that dog. Ezra told me. Vance's wife, Elena Reyes. She was top of her class, led Kale's unit in Kandahar. She died of cancer 2 years ago. You think that doesn't eat him alive?" "So you want to use the girl?" Diesel asked, voice colder now. "No," Rafe snapped. "I want to scare him. Make him look into the face of everything he left behind. Make him feel what Ezra felt in that desert, helpless, abandoned." Diesel stared at him for a moment longer, then walked to the edge of the table and picked up the photo of Ezra. He studied it in silence. "The girl's autistic," Diesel finally said. "Nonverbal, mostly. Always with the dog. That's not just his daughter, it's his anchor." "Exactly," Rafe said. "We shake that foundation, and we break the man." Diesel didn't respond. He slipped the photo into the front pocket of his jacket and stepped outside into the cool night air. The desert stretched wide before him, humming with unseen life. Inside, Rafe turned to the others. "Steel vultures ain't about running drugs anymore," he said. "Not just bikes and bravado. We're about justice, what this country owes us. And I'm going to start with the man who thinks he's too clean to bleed." Cheers rose around him, raw, angry, tribal. Men pounded their fists on the table, some already reaching for gear. Years of war, prison, and the system chewing them up had made them sharp, but not righteous. Rafe was their edge. Outside, Diesel lit a cigarette and watched the smoke curl toward the stars. His gut twisted, not from guilt, but from the line he knew they were about to cross. And from a quiet voice in his head that still remembered orders, honor, and what it meant to follow a man into hell because you believed in the mission. Now, the mission was blurred, twisted by grief. But he'd follow Rafe anyway, for now. Behind him, the roar of engines fired up. The steel vultures were on the move. Ridge Hollow, late afternoon. The sun spilled over the porch in slow amber streaks, catching dust motes mid-air like tiny fireflies. Gabriel stood by the workbench in the shed, sleeves rolled, hands stained with oil from the busted generator he'd been wrestling since noon. A soft buzz broke the silence. his old satellite phone, long forgotten, shoved into a coffee tin beside the toolbox. No one called that number anymore. No one but ghosts. He hesitated before answering. "Vance? Still alive?" came the voice on the other end, dry, low, unmistakable. Raymond Cruz, former Delta Force, now off-grid somewhere in Utah. The kind of man who only reached out when the ground beneath your boots started to crack. "You've been reading my obituary again?" Gabriel smirked. "Wouldn't bother. You're too stubborn to die. Listen, this ain't a social call." Gabriel's expression stiffened. "There's noise," Cruz continued. "Motorcycle gangs out west been sniffing around old units. Not your usual meth head types, organized, deliberate, calling themselves the Steel Vultures." The name landed like a fist in Gabriel's gut. "You sure?" "They've hit 2 VAs in the last month," Cruz said. "They're targeting vets, mostly command staff, the ones who made the calls. There's chatter about unfinished business. Afghanistan." Gabriel went still, every bone in his body tightening. "Helena's name ever come up?" he asked, voice low. "No, but yours has." For a second, the hum of cicadas and distant highway melted away. The world narrowed into a single breath. "Relocate," Cruz said flatly. "Pack the kid, the dog, go dark. Just for a while." Gabriel exhaled through his nose. "Can't do that." "Vance." "I can't raise my daughter looking over my shoulder every day," he interrupted. "That's not living. And she's finally sleeping again, talking a little, after years of silence." A long pause. "You trust the dog?" Gabriel glanced out the shed window. In the backyard, Arya knelt in the grass, her small hands lifting a stick in slow, deliberate motions. Kael stood a few feet away, watchful, still. At each signal from Arya's hand, the dog moved, a step left, a sit, a silent pivot, like he was reading a language no one else could understand. "She trusts him more than me," Gabriel said quietly. "Then don't wait for the storm to come knocking," Cruz warned. "Because if they're already watching, you won't see it coming." Click. The line went dead. Gabriel stood frozen, thumb still on the receiver. He hadn't told Cruz about the gas station, about the man in the leather jacket with the ghost of war behind his eyes. Rafe Maddox. He shoved the phone back in the tin and closed the lid with more force than needed. That night, the house settled around them in soft creaks and sighs. Gabriel double-checked the locks, then paused at Arya's door. It was cracked open, just enough for Kael to squeeze in if needed. Her nightlight glowed like a low ember in the corner, casting the room in warm orange tones. He didn't want to wake her, but something tugged at him. Inside, Arya knelt beside Kael, the dog lying sphinx-like on the rug. She wasn't asleep. She was focused, mouth silent, eyes intense, hands moving in crisp, practiced gestures. "Stand," she signed. Kael rose. "Circle." He turned slowly, not breaking eye contact. "Guard." Kael shifted position, stepping between her and the bedroom door, tail still, breath steady. She smiled, not wide, but soft. It was the kind of smile that only existed in quiet triumphs. The kind her mother used to give after nailing a sequence during K-9 drills. The kind Gabriel hadn't seen since the funeral. He swallowed back the ache. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently, voice barely above a whisper. Arya didn't flinch. She held up a hand. "Wait." Then, deliberately, she repeated the sequence again, slower. Kael obeyed without hesitation. Gabriel stepped farther into the room. "You're training him again?" She nodded, fingers moving. "Safe. Stay sharp. For Mommy." The words hit like a dart to the chest. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her small shoulder. "You remember what she taught him, huh?" Arya nodded, then pointed to her temple. "Kale remembers, too." Gabriel looked at the dog. Kale stared back with eyes that had seen too many wars and still chose peace when Arya was near. There was something ancient in him, something sacred. "She used to say dogs don't forget," Arya said, quietly this time. "Especially when they love someone." Gabriel's jaw tightened. She was right. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old wind chime on the porch, the one Elena bought in Kandahar, carved from a shell casing. It sang a hollow, broken tune. Gabriel stood. "We'll be okay," he said softly. But Kael didn't move. He remained in guard mode, eyes fixed on the door as if waiting for something only he could sense. Something already coming. The morning light in Ridge Hollow arrived like a whisper golden, filtered through the pines, touching the earth with reverence. Dew still clung to the blades of grass, and the air held the kind of silence that only came after a storm no one heard. Gabriel stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, the house hushed. No cartoons, no chatter, just the low hum of Kael breathing at the door, eyes always watching, always ready. It was the sudden absence of sound that tugged at him. Then he saw her. Out front, sprawled across the cracked sidewalk, Arya knelt with a fistful of chalk, her hands smudged with color, her braid half undone, her pink hoodie stained at the elbows. Her small body bent with focus and something more, something weighted and unknowable. The kind of posture that only visited old souls in young skin. He stepped out slowly, coffee forgotten. Kael was already ahead of him, padding toward the driveway on silent pause. The dog stopped short just before reaching her, tail still, ears tilted, not alert, but listening. Not guarding, but sensing. Arya didn't look up. Her hands moved in smooth arcs, dragging wide lines of orange, red, and purple. The sidewalk was transformed into a canvas, chaotic and deliberate all at once. And then Gabriel saw the image. At the center was a tall woman in uniform, her hair tied back, a hand outstretched, resting gently on the head of a dark-furred German shepherd. Beside them stood a little girl, smaller than the others, clutching the dog's leg like a lifeline. Behind them, rising from the chalk cracks like smoke from an old wound, a wall of fire. Not cartoonish or childish. It roared with jagged, angry strokes. It devoured buildings drawn in ghost white, helicopters in the sky, figures running, and one figure down, face turned away, unfinished. Gabriel's breath caught. "Arya, what is this?" She didn't answer. Kael crept forward and sat beside her, his eyes locked not on the flames but on the chalk version of Elena. The drawing wasn't precise, but it held her spirit. The way her stance always tilted slightly forward, ready to lead. The faint curve of a smile that never fully reached her eyes when she was on duty. Kael sniffed it and whimpered. Gabriel blinked. He had never heard Kael make that sound. Not during bombings, not during thunder, not during nights Arya woke up screaming. It was low, deep, a sound born in memory, not fear. "She remembers," Arya said suddenly, still not facing him. Her voice came soft but certain. "Kael does." Gabriel crouched slowly. "What do you mean, baby?" "She dreams the fire," Arya said. "Same as me." Gabriel felt his throat tighten. Elena's last mission had been top secret. Only fragments ever made it out. An extraction gone wrong. Chaos. Cale found burned and bloodied beside her empty helmet. "She was there," Arya whispered. "In the fire, calling him back." Cale lay down fully now, nose against the image of Elena, body trembling, not from cold, but recognition. His chest rose and fell with heavy rhythm, like each breath carried the weight of ash. Gabriel looked closer. In the background of the mural, near the flames, Arya had drawn something else. A figure cloaked in black, faceless, but present. Watching. Looming. "Who's that?" Gabriel asked. She paused, then pointed to her temple. "I don't know, but Cale does." He reached for her hand gently. "Did someone say something to you? Did you see someone out here?" She shook her head. "No one said, but it's in here." She tapped her chest this time. "It's like something's waiting, hiding in the smoke." Gabriel glanced toward the tree line. Nothing moved, but suddenly the air felt thicker. He stood up, forcing calm into his voice. "Let's head in, okay? Breakfast's getting cold." Arya looked up at him. "She's still here, Daddy. Just not how we want." He nodded, though it felt like his heart cracked a little. "I know, sweetheart." Cale lingered behind as Arya walked in, her chalk-stained fingers dragging along the porch railing. The dog stared at the drawing, especially the fire, his eyes dark, his ears pulled back like they could catch a voice long gone. And then, just before turning to follow, Cale raised his head to the sky and growled, a low, guttural sound, as if warning something unseen. Gabriel stepped closer to the chalk. His boots brushed the edge of the flames, and for a second, just one, he swore he smelled smoke. The wind that morning felt different too, still for autumn in Ridge Hollow, like something was holding its breath. Arya sat cross-legged at the edge of the driveway, humming tunelessly, feeding Cale bits of apple slices while he rested his head in her lap. Cale didn't eat. He stared down the road. Gabriel was inside, fixing a loose window hinge, unaware that something or someone was already approaching. Not with the clatter of boots or the rumble of engines, but quieter, measured, like someone who knew how to move through war zones without leaving footprints. The crunch of gravel made Cale rise. He didn't bark. He stood between Arya and the approaching figure. The man wore a denim jacket faded by time and travel, black gloves even though it wasn't cold, and mirrored aviators that made his expression unreadable. His beard was short, his frame lean but solid, like a man who used to train for war but now trained to disappear. "Nice dog," the man said, stopping a few feet away. His voice had that unsettling calm, the kind you hear from someone who doesn't need to raise it to be dangerous. Arya tilted her head. Cale didn't move. "Don't worry," the man added, raising both hands slowly. "Just passing through. Bike broke down. Gas station said there's a vet who lives out this way." He motioned toward the road behind him. "Didn't expect to meet his daughter first." Arya didn't answer. She studied him. Cale's ears flicked. His nose twitched, uneasy, uncertain, not hostile, not yet. "What's his name?" she asked, voice small but firm. The man smiled just a little. "Cale, right? Named after the lieutenant that trained with Elena?" The moment he said her mother's name, Arya's spine straightened. Cale moved forward a half step. A low growl started to rise, but the man didn't flinch. "You knew my mom?" Arya asked, her voice suddenly breathless. The man crouched slightly far enough to not tower over her, but still out of Cale's reach. "We served together," he said. "Not directly. I worked recon." "She worked miracles." Arya blinked. Kyle was her miracle. The man's smile turned somber. "He still is." He reached into his jacket, slow and deliberate, and pulled something from a zipped pocket no bigger than a coin. A small metal tag, worn, with a faint etched insignia, a curved fang crossing over a dog's silhouette. Elena's old K9 unit symbol. He set it on the sidewalk between them. "A souvenir," he said, "from a time your mom made the impossible happen. Thought you should have it." Kyle didn't take his eyes off the man. The tag shimmered under the sun, catching Arya's eye like a fragment of memory brought to life. Her fingers hovered over it, unsure. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man stood, brushing off his knees. "Call me Diesel. That's what your mom used to call me anyway. Said I ran quiet, but hit hard." He looked toward the house, then back at Kyle. "Still got that look in his eyes," he murmured. "Always could read a threat before the rest of us caught our breath." "Why now?" Arya asked. "Why come here?" Diesel didn't answer directly. "There's talk," he said instead. "Things moving in shadows. Thought someone should be watching your six." Cale took another step forward now, body still low but muscles coiled. Diesel raised a hand. "Easy, soldier. Not your war, not yet." Then he looked down at Arya one last time. His voice dropped, quieter than a breeze. "Hold on to that tag. If anything happens, you'll know who to trust." And then he walked. No goodbyes, no questions. He vanished down the road like mist pulled back into the trees. Arya stared after him long after he was gone, then looked down at the tag. Kyle nosed it once, gently, and for a moment the wind picked up again, soft, circling, as if someone unseen had exhaled. It happened at 2:14 a.m., the kind of hour where the world forgets to breathe, when streets go silent, and even the stars seem to dim. The explosion shattered the stillness glass, fire, and the metallic screech of alarms tearing through Ridge Hollow. Red and orange flames licked at the dark sky above the VFW hall, a place where folded flags and quiet grief lined the walls. A place sacred to men who came home broken and women who waited too long. And now it burned. Gabriel's phone buzzed first. Then the emergency dispatch radio on the shelf crackled into life. But he was already up, boots on, jacket half-zipped. Kyle stood at the door before he even moved, alert, tail stiff, as if the scent of violence had drifted in on the wind. "Stay with her," Gabriel said, nodding toward Arya's room. Kyle didn't blink. Outside, the streets were lighting up with sirens, porch lights, and shaken neighbors in robes and worry. By the time Gabriel reached the VFW hall, the fire trucks were trying to tame the blaze, but the front windows were already gone, and inside, chairs and flags were reduced to cinders. A blackened glass bottle lay near the entrance, charred cloth still dangling from its neck. Molotov. A message. Not an accident. "Who'd do this?" muttered Hank Jordan, one of the older vets, his voice trembling as he held a flashlight in calloused hands. "This place. This was ours." Gabriel's jaw clenched. He bent down, fingers hovering near the remains of the bottle. Chemical residue. Accelerant. Too precise for kids messing around. No. This was personal. By morning, a meeting was called at the church basement. No one called the cops, not yet. Too many around here had learned the hard way. When you're a vet with scars that don't show, no one listens until blood's already on the ground. "We start watch rotations," Gabriel said, standing before the room full of veterans. "Two-man teams, every night." "Think it's the vultures?" someone asked. Gabriel didn't answer right away, but Cale, sitting silently near the door, lifted his head, ears twitching, sensing something, someone. Gabriel nodded once. "Let's assume yes." No one argued. Back at home, Arya had drawn all the curtains. She stood frozen at the living room window, gripping the tag Diesel had left behind so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were wide, but not crying, just stuck like the fear had numbed every muscle but one, her heart pounding like it wanted out. When the sirens started the second time, fire trucks returning with more crews, she crumpled. Not like a tantrum, not like a child, like someone reliving something that didn't belong in her years. Her hands flew to her ears. She sank to the floor, rocking, muttering fragments of words that didn't form sentences. Just gasps, broken memory, and the sound of glass exploding that only she could hear. Kyle came to her slowly. No bark, no rush. He laid down beside her, head resting on her legs, eyes never leaving hers. Then a quiet whine, barely audible, like a whisper that said, "I'm here, you're safe." It took time, but her hands loosened, her breath slowed, and when she finally looked at him, the tears were silent but steady. "He was on fire," she whispered. Gabriel, who had returned just in time to hear it, froze in the hallway. She'd never said those words before. Later that night, Gabriel stood outside on the porch, arms crossed, eyes scanning the tree line. He knew this was just the beginning. The vultures weren't sending warnings, they were probing weaknesses, and he'd just shown them his. Inside, Cale stayed close to Arya's room, his tail occasionally thumping the floor softly, as if reminding the silence that he was still watching, still ready, still waiting for the next threat. The charred walls of the VFW still smoldered when Gabriel rolled his old Harley into Mike Donnelly's barn. Inside, a dozen bikes already lined up nose-to-tail chrome, dulled by desert sand, tanks repainted in matte blacks and flat greens, each wearing scars that matched the riders who straddled them. These men and women had once driven armored convoys through Helmand, flown dust-choked medevacs out of Kunar, patched bullet holes in tents at Bagram. Now they gathered beneath a splintered roof in Ridge Hollow, called back to duty by the taste of smoke on local wind. Hank Jordan, Vietnam vet, age pushing 70 but sinews still iron-adjusted a topo map pinned to a hay bale wall. Colored pushpins bloomed across the town grid. Blue for schools, yellow for clinics, red for every veteran-owned storefront already threatened. 2 bike patrols, Gabriel said, marker clicking in his fist. Shift change every 4 hours. Radios on the emergency channel crews sent us. If you see a vulture cut across your sector, you tail, but don't engage until backup's in range. Clear? A rumble of hoo-ah rolled through the barn like distant artillery. Gabriel met each pair of eyes, noting the mix of apprehension and fierce purpose. The world had told them their wars were over. The world had been wrong. At the back, Kyle paced in a slow figure 8, nails ticking on the concrete. A month ago he'd been content to retire into guarded peace, but flames had a way of waking old instincts. He halted when Arya slipped in through the side door, clutching a small sewing kit and a scrap of desert tan fabric. Gabriel's voice softened. "Sweetheart, thought you were helping Diana collect first aid supplies." "It's done," she answered, words measured but clear. She motioned to Kael's vest, lying across a stool-grade cordura, faded unit patch half torn. Needs her name. Tiny hands worked quick stitches, steady, precise, the way Elena once taught her to mend field gear while huddled beside a heater in Kabul. The barn fell almost silent as riders watched the child pull thread through canvas, loop after loop, until the letters E. Reyes curved proud beneath the American flag. Finished, Arya set down the needle and lifted the vest. Gabriel crouched to buckle it over Kael's shoulders. When the final strap snapped, Kael squared himself, every muscle aligning as if armor had slipped back over bone. Hank broke the hush. "Dog looks 10 years younger. Dog looks ready to take a bullet," muttered Serena Knox, ex-MP, her scarred left hand resting on a Springfield pistol. "Which is exactly what he'd do." Arya pressed her palm to Kael's chest plate. He dipped his head until their foreheads touched, signal complete. The room exhaled. Gabriel turned back to the map. "We'll call ourselves Veteran Riders VR on the comms. Steel Vultures run intimidation. We run deterrence. Difference is, we remember the rules of engagement." Serena grinned. "And we actually aim." A ripple of weary laughter. Gabriel tapped 3 red pins clustered on the east side. "High-risk zones, grain silo, the elementary bus depot, Tom Mason's rebuilt hardware store. First patrol pushes out at 1900. I'll take point with Hank." Mike Donnelly tossed a duffel to Gabriel old Kevlar inserts, handheld flares, surplus tourniquets. "Got more stashed if things turn sideways." "They will," Hank said bluntly. Gabriel didn't contradict him. He folded the map, tucked it into his jacket, then faced the riders one last time. "We're not hunting a war. We're guarding a home. That means discipline. That means restraint. And that means we outthink them long before we outgun them." Helmets snapped shut, visors dropped, engines coughed alive, the barn reverberating with synchronized thunder. The same cadence of Apaches spooling up on Afghan tarmacs, of Bradleys grumbling awake outside Fallujah. Muscle memory kicked in, postures straightened. Arya covered her ears but kept her eyes on the convoy. Kael stayed beside her, tail low, waiting for orders. Gabriel knelt. "You okay with this?" She nodded, then tapped her temple. "Kael hears everything." A pause. "Tell them not to be loud near Mrs. Carson's house. She still startles easy." The simplicity gutted him more than any mortar blast could. He kissed her forehead. "I will." Outside, dusk bled into the treetops. The veteran riders rolled out in staggered pairs, headlights off until they reached asphalt, then blooming into white spears that cut the growing dark. As Gabriel throttled up, Kael leapt into Serena's sidecar vest, gleaming under street lamps, the E. Reyes patch catching final slants of sun. From the porch, Arya raised her hand in a silent salute. Kael barked once sharp, resolute, as if answering an order only he could hear, and the riders roared into the night, chasing the echo of a war they never truly left, ready to guard the fragile heartbeat of a town that had forgotten how to sleep. The Ridge Hollow Public Library was the safest place Arya knew that wasn't home. Sun-faded murals of storybook wolves lined the children's wing, and the stack smelled of paper and lavender cleaner, quiet enough for her thoughts to settle, bright enough for Kael's watchful eyes to roam every corner at once. Saturday, 3:47 p.m. Arya sat cross-legged in the reading nook, tracing a fingertip across braille bumps on a tactile copy of The Secret Garden. Across from her, Eli Thompson, 12, lanky, summer freckles, balanced a comic on his knees, sneaking glances at Cale every other panel. "He's like a tank," Eli whispered. "You sure he won't bite if I pet him?" "Cale only bites lightning," Arya answered. "Code for he doesn't bite good people." She offered a shy half-smile. Eli grinned back and extended a cautious hand. Cale accepted the greeting with one soft huff, then resumed scanning the doorway. Outside, clouds bruised the sky. Thunder grumbled in the distance. Arya's shoulders twitched at the low boom, but Cale nudged her elbow, grounding her. She inhaled 4 counts, held 7, exhaled 8, like Dr. Martinez taught, like Mom taught. Sirens wailed somewhere far off, fire units still on rotating patrols. Yet the street beyond the window looked calm. No bikes, no gang colors, just late summer leaves skittering across cracked pavement. Then the front doors slammed. 3 men burst in, leather vests, steel vulture patches, gasoline stink clinging to denim. One shouldered a 2-gallon can. Another cradled a bundle of beer bottles stuffed with rag wicks. Time folded. Cale sprang, positioning himself between Arya and the aisle. A low growl vibrated through his chest, warning, promise, command. Eli's comic hit the carpet. "We have to hide," he whispered. But Arya didn't move. Her eyes locked on the leader's scarred knuckles as he yanked the fire alarm, clang, 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 sending red strobes over every shelf. She felt the sound crash into her skull, felt it scrape her nerves raw. Cale leaned against her, steadying. The men scattered accelerant across carpets, up the circulation desk, over the mural wolves. Matches flared tiny suns, and suddenly flames curled along the floor, ravenous. Children screamed. A librarian shouted evacuation orders, drowned by the alarm. Smoke blossomed overhead, thick and gray, slipping fast through the rafters. "Come on!" Eli grabbed Arya's wrist, yanking her toward the emergency exit, but a wall of heat flared there, cutting them off. Cale barked once sharp and bolted into an adjacent aisle where 2 toddlers cried beside an overturned cart. He herded them gentle nips at sleeves, insistent nudges toward the rear stairwell labeled Archives. The door was ajar. The corridor beyond still clear of smoke. Eli and Arya followed, coughing. The library lights flickered, then died. Only the alarm's strobes painted the hallway a frantic red. Down narrow stairs, Cale guided the toddlers into a staff-loading bay garage-style doors facing an alley. But the chain padlock was looped, latch engaged. Eli fumbled with it, hands slick with sweat. "It's jammed!" Cale pressed his shoulder to the toddlers, shooing them behind a row of book carts. He lunged at the lock teeth, clamped on the chain, yanked. Metal rattled but held. He tried again, harder. The chain bit back, slicing a gash across his muzzle. Blood dotted the concrete. Arya's breath stuttered. Sirens outside grew louder, closer, but the smoke poured heavier now, funneling down the stairwell like night through a funnel. She searched the wall-fire axe in a red case. Hands shaking, she shattered the glass with a heel strike Mom once taught. Plant, pivot, kick. She yanked the axe free, passed it to Eli. Eli's eyes widened. "You serious?" She nodded. 2 sharp beats. Eli swung. Sparks flew. A second swing and the padlock snapped. Cale pushed the door with his chest metal, shrieked upward. Cool air flooded in, swirling smoke outward. Eli guided the toddlers into the alley first. Arya started after them, then stopped. Cale had turned back toward the stairs, ears pinned, hackles high. "No," Arya whispered, voice breaking. But she saw what he saw. a silhouette, stumbling into the stairwell, Ms. Green, the elderly librarian, lost in the haze. Kyle charged. Flames licked the lower steps. The stair rail glowed red. He bounded through, teeth clamped on Ms. Green's sleeve, dragging her coughing, disoriented down the last flights. The stairwell ceiling groaned. Ceiling tiles dropped in fiery confetti. Kyle shielded her with his body, guiding her past the threshold. Only when everyone stood in the alley did Kyle's rear leg buckle slightly. The cut on his muzzle dripped crimson onto ash-dust concrete. But he held his stance, silent, resolute. Fire engines barreled up to the front facade as windows burst outward in flaming shards. Eli wrapped a blanket around Ms. Green. Paramedics scooped the toddlers into oxygen masks. Arya knelt beside Kyle, pressing both hands to his cheeks, tears streaking soot across her face. She signed, "Good soldier." Kyle exhaled, eyes soft despite the pain. Gabriel arrived seconds later on his Harley, Hank tight behind. The sight of the inferno froze him mid-dismount. When he spotted Arya alive, but shaking, and Kyle bleeding, something inside him cracked. He rushed over, knelt. "Baby, are you hurt?" She shook her head, pointed to Kyle's wound. "Fix him." He pressed a trembling hand over the gash. "Hold on, buddy. Medic's coming." Eli stepped forward. "He saved us all," he said, voice breaking. "Even went back for Ms. Green." Gabriel met the boy's eyes, saw courage there, saw gratitude, saw the face of every kid he ever hauled into safety overseas. He nodded once, throat too tight for words. Fire chief lights strobed, reporters gathered, and in the roar of hoses drenching decades of stories, Gabriel realized the truth. The steel vultures weren't just striking veteran landmarks, they were hunting his landmarks. Places Arya called safe. This was no warning. This was war dressed like revenge. He wrapped his arms around Arya and Kale both, the smell of smoke clinging to them like a prophecy. Somewhere in the blaze's roar, Gabriel could almost hear Rafe's gravel voice. "Bring your ghosts, Captain. We'll burn them together." The veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and cedar shavings, too clean to feel safe, too bright for the hour. Gabriel had broken every speed limit from the library to the outskirts of town. Kale bled silently in the back seat, while Arya pressed a towel to the wound, whispering the breath count 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out, more for herself than for him. Dr. Lyle Sutton met them at the door, gray hair mussed, stethoscope already swinging around his neck. "Treatment room 3, he ordered, voice clipped. "Let's move." Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, glaring off stainless steel tables. Gabriel helped lift Kyle's 75 pounds of muscle gone rigid with duty onto the platform. The dog didn't whine as Dr. Sutton clipped leads to his chest and slid the portable X-ray plate beneath his torso. "Pressure bandage held," the vet muttered, eyes on the crimson-soaked gauze. "But I want imaging before we close." Arya hovered beside the table, fingers splayed against Kyle's flank. Blood smeared across her sleeve, dried black under her nails. She didn't flinch at the beeps or at the metallic clack as the X-ray panel snapped in place. Gabriel tried to guide her back 2 steps sterile field, but she shook her head once fiercely. "I stay," she said. Not a plea, a declaration. Dr. Sutton glanced at Gabriel. Gabriel only nodded. The vet pressed a pedal, and the machine's whir filled the room light, flaring through marrow and memory. An image blossomed on the monitor, bones luminous, lung fields ghost gray, a spider web of old shrapnel glinting near Kyl's left hip. Sutton's brows knit. He zoomed, traced a line with his cursor. There. He tapped the glass. Fragment lodged near the sciatic notch. Not from tonight, looks years old. Gabriel's throat tightened. Kandahar. It's shifted, Sutton continued, voice dropping. Probably fine these last years, but the impact tonight tore surrounding tissue. He's compensating, but it's bleeding inside. Can you pull it? Gabriel asked. Yes, but I'll need to open, irrigate, close the arterial nick. We're talking an hour on the table, maybe more. He turned to Arya. Sweetheart, you can wait in the lobby? No, she whispered, standing taller. He waited for me. Something in her tone, steady yet breaking eclipsed protocol. Sutton exhaled. Scrub in, then. You watch from there. He pointed to a stool by the cabinet, out of sterile range but close enough for Kale to smell her. While a tech shaved the fur around the wound, Arya washed her hands at the sink, hot water, soap, up to elbows the way her mother once taught her in a camp tent half a world away. She slipped a paper gown over her hoodie, mask loose beneath her chin, until Sutton reminded her. Up, please. She obeyed. Under anesthesia, Kale's eyes drifted half-closed, lids fluttering. Arya touched 2 fingers to his paw signal for I'm here. His ear twitched in response. A line of saline dripped. The monitor pulsed rhythm, scalpel glinted. Incision. The smell of cautery iron filled the room, metal and something earthy, almost like burnt cedar. Gabriel stood against the far wall, arms crossed so tight his biceps shook. He'd smelled this before, in field hospitals where the air tasted of fear and diesel. Sutton worked in silence, suction hissing, clamps clicking, a battlefield symphony slowed to heartbeat tempo. At the stool, Arya's eyes never left the surgical field. Her lashes clumped with unshed tears. Every time blood welled, her breath paused, then resumed only when Sutton spoke to the tech. Fragment out. Sutton dropped the jagged metal shard into a dish with a soft clang. It was the size of a pencil eraser, edges scalloped, dark with old rust. Gabriel's knees buckled. He steadied himself on the doorframe. All these years, he thought, he carried it for us. Sutton irrigated, sutured, layered muscle, fascia, then skin. When he finished the final knot, he stepped back, shoulders slumping with exhaustion. Vitals stable. Bring him around slow. Arya slid off the stool, mask damp with tears. She reached for the shard in the dish, hesitated, then closed her fist around it like a secret. Sutton watched. Careful. It's sharp. Good, she murmured. She turned to Kale, now bandaged, breathing shallow under warming lights. He gave blood. I keep the pain. Her voice cracked on pain. Gabriel moved behind her, hands on her shoulders. She leaned back, allowing the weight of him for a heartbeat before stepping to Kale's head. The dog's gaze fluttered open, drug-dazed amber locking onto her green. She placed the shard beside his paw, then pressed her forehead to his. Safe, she whispered. Home. A single tear slipped onto his fur. His tail thumped once, tired, but resolute. Sutton dimmed the overhead lights. He'll stay overnight for observation. You can sit with him till morning. Arya nodded, dragging a chair closer. Gabriel exhaled at last. Thank you, Doc. Sutton stripped off his gloves. I patch flesh, he said softly. You two patch the rest. Through the window, dawn's first color bled into the sky, a fragile pink, tentative against receding night. In the hush of monitors and the hum of healing machines, Gabriel realized that the war outside was only half the battle. The other half lived here, in this room where a child traded sleep for vigil, and a soldier dog fought one more quiet fight because a little girl asked him to. And he vowed, in the glow of sterile light, that if the steel vultures wanted war, they'd have to step over the unbreakable bond of a dog and his girl, something no bullet, blade, or shard of shrapnel had yet broken. Outside, sirens rested at last. But Gabriel knew the next alarm was only a breath away. The house lay hushed but for Kael's slow, rasp-soft breathing in the living room, every exhale the determined rhythm of a dog still stitched together. Dawn thinned the dark, slanting between half-closed blinds, and dust motes drifted like muted confetti. Gabriel should have been asleep on the couch beside Kael's pallet. Instead, insomnia gnawed at him. He sat cross-legged on the hardwood, a dented metal footlocker open before his knees. Elena's locker. He had not cracked it in years, but the sight of the library in flames had shaken memory loose. He needed a compass, anything to chart the blurred ground between then and now. Inside clung the smell of old leather and sun-baked canvas, field journals edged in sand, a pair of cracked desert boots, a half-empty vial of dog pheromone training oil, photographs cinched by a strip of paracord. Gabriel untied the bundle and leafed through frozen instants. Elena laughing inside a mess tent, black grease streaked across her cheek. Elena crouched in a kennel, a German shepherd pup licking her chin. Elena on a firing range, arms locked, eyes flint-bright. Then the picture that stilled him. Edges singed, colors washed by Afghan sun, the snapshot read, Kandahar, 2011. Elena in desert camo knelt beside a gangly Belgian Malinois pup. A man crouched next to her. Tan fatigues, mirrored aviators, sweat-dark buzz-cut one hand on the dog's collar, the other flashing a thumbs up. The name tape on his chest read Dyson, but the grin was unmistakable. Diesel. Gabriel felt his pulse hitch. Seeing Diesel's arm draped across Elena's shoulder untwisted something he had tried to bury. He flipped the photo over. Elena's neat block letters covered the back. Ghost Mother and Diesel. Fang class saved this pup from being culled. Saved. He stared at the word until it blurred. Rumor said that litter had been born underweight, slated for euthanasia. Elena had fought for their lives and won. Had Diesel stood beside her, or only watched? A floorboard creaked. Aria padded in from the hallway, blanket shawled around her shoulders, hair a halo of tangles. She knelt opposite him. Kael lifted his head, ears ticking, then relaxed. Gabriel turned the photo face up so she could see. Recognition flashed in her eyes. He knew Mom. So it seems. Is he good, or the other? Bad was too simple. Ridge Hollow had taught them to speak in grays. I don't know, Gabriel admitted. Aria's finger traced the pup in the image. Mom saved him. Maybe Diesel saves things, too. Maybe, he murmured, though the library fire snarled in his mind. He flipped deeper into the bundle. After-action reports, laminated range cards scribbled with Elena's tidy notes. One sheet handler team, roster listed, Dyson R. Recon/Overwatch liaison. Aria fetched the shard of shrapnel Diesel had left and placed it beside the photo as though slotting puzzle pieces. Gabriel rubbed his temples. If Diesel cares about Elena's legacy, he thought, why serve Rafe? Maybe he's stuck, Aria offered, tiny shoulders lifting. The phrase cracked something open. Gabriel rose, withdrew a battered notebook with burner numbers, flipped to Cruz's contact, then closed it again. Intel could wait. Perspective could not. "Let's ask Kyle." They moved to the couch. Gabriel held the photo under the dog's nose. Kyle sniffed, ears pricking. A softness surfaced, recognition, maybe fondness. A low, contented woof escaped him. "Friend," Arya translated, smiling. Skepticism splintered. Diesel had earned places Elena trusted, yet he now rode with Rafe Maddox, a man who set towns ablaze. The moral compass spun. Gabriel pocketed the photo. He would hunt Diesel down, but he would leave the door cracked for redemption, Elena's favored tactic. Arya curled beside Kale and whispered, "Wake me when Mom's light comes back." Dawn's code. "I will," Gabriel promised, and watched first color creep over distant hills, feeling tomorrow tilt closer to conflict, a conflict tempered by the hope that a ghost from Kandahar might still choose the right side of history. Steel Vulture's warehouse, mid-evening. Rusted corrugated walls rattled as a freight train screamed past. Inside, sodium lamps spat sickly light onto oil-stained concrete. A semicircle of motorbikes idled, cooling engines, while patched riders watched their leader pace. Rafe Maddox moved like a caged panther, fists opening and closing under a black spray-painted flag. On a battered tool cart rested three objects: a tablet looping drone footage of Ridge Hollow's library fire, a hypodermic syringe brimming with clear fluid, and a steel-jawed choke collar. When Diesel stepped from the shadows, helmet tucked under one arm, Rafe stabbed a finger at the screen. "That mutt keeps ruining everything." "He was trained to save," Diesel answered. "Elena made sure." "Elena's dead." Jealousy flickered behind Rafe's eyes. "Her widower is marching a damn K9 in front of every camera, turning Vance into a martyr. I'm done watching." He lifted the syringe. "Ketamine cocktail, enough to drop a horse. Slip it in the dog, dump the body in the river. You're quiet, you get close." "You want me to execute Kale?" Diesel's voice went flat. "Neutralize," Rafe corrected, the word dripping the same bureaucratic chill that had once abandoned their brother Ezra. "You in or out?" For a moment Diesel's features were stone, but memories sliced through. Elena's laugh caught in Kandahar dust, Kale's puppy tongue against his boots, Ezra grinning under Afghan sun. Betray one to avenge another, what calculus balanced that? "I'll handle it," he said. Rafe's grin widened. The syringe disappeared into Diesel's pocket, but the choke collar remained on the cart. Near midnight, drizzle smeared the chalk mural on Vance's back wall. Gabriel dozed in a chair by the bay window, rifle within reach. Kyle lay at his feet, bandaged leg twitching. A shadow breached the garden gate, silent, measured. Diesel slipped through the shrubs, pulse drumming. In his palm was no syringe now, only a flathead screwdriver and a signal jammer. One porch board squeaked. Kale's ears snapped up. Diesel froze. The dog inhaled, catching a scent older than pain memory of kennels, of training sessions, of hands that once fed him. Kale rose, tail low, and limped to the screen door with a questioning huff. Gabriel jolted awake, rifle half raised. "Easy, Captain," Diesel whispered through the mesh. "You fire, neighbors call cops. Vultures trace the shot." Gabriel's safety stayed off. 20 seconds. Diesel held up the jammer. "Vultures embedded trackers on patrol routes. One's in Kyle's collar. I kill it. You stay ghosts." After a beat, Gabriel unlatched the door. Diesel knelt, unscrewed Kyle's brass tag, exposed a rice grain chip, pried it free, sealed it in foil, and flipped the jammer on. An LED died. All they'll see is static. "Rafe told you to drug him," Gabriel said. "I won't kill a soldier still doing his job." "Then why help us at all?" Diesel's hand lingered on Cale's ruff. "Because Elena once saved a runt nobody wanted. He became a legend. Some debts don't wash off." Cale pressed his head to Diesel's chest in silent salute. "Rafe's hitting the school bus depot at first light," Diesel warned. "Your veteran riders will be outnumbered 3-1. "Ride with us," Gabriel urged. "I travel the gray," Diesel said, looking toward Aria's doorway. She watched, unit patch clutched in her fist. He tapped 2 fingers to his brow, a soldier's vow, then vanished into the dark, leaving only the tang of diesel exhaust and a question in Gabriel's chest. When bullets fly, which side will the ghost choose? Inside, Cale positioned himself beside Aria's door, jammer blinking a stubborn green. Aria stroked his fur. "Safe, for now," she whispered. Engines revved in the distance, steel vultures tuning wrath for dawn. Gabriel exhaled, tasting a hope stronger than smoke. Pre-dawn frost silvered the abandoned boxcars beyond town. A single lantern throbbed atop an overturned crate, barely holding back the dark. Gabriel waited in the faint circle of light, rifle slung, safety off. Vapor spiraled from his breath. Diesel arrived on time, boots crunching gravel, rucksack over one shoulder, eyes a decade older than the night before. "You came alone," Gabriel observed. "Only way you'd trust me." Diesel set the ruck down, hands open. "No tricks." Gabriel kept the rifle raised. "Promises are cheap where you walk." Diesel drew a creased envelope from his jacket. ER was scrawled across the flap. "Your wife handed it to me before her last patrol. She said, 'If I don't make it, Vance will need reminding.'" He offered it. Gabriel took the letter, but didn't open it yet. "She wrote about Aria," Diesel said softly. "Said Cale wasn't just a dog, he was a bridge between the war she lived and the home she was building." His voice cracked. Her last words weren't fear. They were, "Tell him to keep the bridge standing." Silence stretched, broken only by a distant owl. Gabriel swallowed. "Why now?" "Because I failed to deliver sooner, and because Rafe's ready to burn that bridge to ash." Diesel nudged the rucksack forward. Metal clinked inside. 200 grand, untraceable, skimmed off Rafe's arms deals. Enough for Cale's surgeries. Therapy, whatever it takes. Gabriel's brow furrowed. "Blood money." "Money is what you make of it," Diesel said. "Let the vultures finance the healing they're bent on destroying." He knelt, unzipped the bag. Bricks of bills marked by a foreign bank. "You steal this, Rafe will know." "I'm counting on it," Diesel replied. "He already doubts me. This will shove him off balance, make him sloppy." "Sloppy means bodies, or exposure." Diesel's eyes flashed. "Ezra lost his leg in that ambush. Rafe feeds on that grievance, but he never told you Elena saved Ezra from a tunnel collapse weeks earlier." Realization flickered in Gabriel's eyes. "Ezra never blamed me." "Exactly. He wrote you letters during rehab." Diesel's jaw tightened. "Rafe kept them, because a forgiven enemy can't fuel revenge." "Where is Ezra?" "VA Center, 2 states west. Rafe keeps him isolated. The man still asks about you, about Elena's dog." Gabriel looked at the letter in his hand. Guilt tipped beneath new gravity. "And you?" he asked. "What do you deserve?" Diesel almost smiled. "A clean shot at redemption. Maybe this is it." He stepped back into shadow. "At sunrise, Rafe will marshal 40 bikes east of the bus depot. Post your riders on the west flank. I'll sabotage his fuel tankers. When you see smoke, move." Gabriel flicked the rifle off safe. "Why risk everything for my kid and my dog?" "Because that dog once taught me what loyalty looks like. And that kid reminds me why we fought at all." With that, Diesel vanished among the boxcars. The lantern's glow felt suddenly fragile. Gabriel stared after the disappearing footfalls, then at Rafe's stolen fortune and Elena's unopened letter. The line between friend and foe had never felt sharper nor more crucial. He pocketed the envelope, hoisted the rucksack, and left the yards, boots crunching gravel in time with a pulse now beating to something other than dread. Back at the farmhouse, Cale's ears pricked toward the distant rattle of freight wheels. Sensing some hinge in the dark had shifted, Arya slept against his shoulder, unaware that a ghost was rearranging the battlefield for her sake. And as first light skimmed the hills, Gabriel finally believed the bridge might hold so long as everyone who had ever crossed it kept their promises at dawn. Friday's fall assembly smelled of tempera paint and apple juice cartons. Third graders ran scales on "This land is your land," while teachers fussed with crepe paper harvest trees. Gabriel Collins, chaperone for the day, kept one eye on the crowd and the other on Cale, who lay dozing at Arya's feet near the front row. His phone vibrated, an encrypted channel he shared with exactly 2 people, neither of whom should be calling. One text, no header, "Bomb under stage, evacuate now," static on the callback. Gabriel's pulse spiked. He knelt, slid 2 fingers beneath the shepherd's collar. Find. Years ago in Afghanistan, the word had meant hidden IED. Kyle still remembered. The dog rose, nose combing the air, hips stiff but determined. Arya read the tension, nodded. "I understand." Kyle trotted the aisle, ignoring lunch tray smells, bounded onto the stage, then froze mid-boards, hackles up. That was enough. Gabriel strode to Principal Jennings. "Fire drill now." Something in his tone cut argument short. Alarms shrieked. Teachers guided children toward exits, confusion tightening into lines of color-coded jackets. While the room emptied, Gabriel followed Cale to a trap door behind the curtain. He yanked it up, aimed his phone light into dust and paint cans, and saw a metal drum wired to a cheap phone detonator, timer already blinking 3 min 42 sec. Fertilizer, nails, crude but lethal. No bomb suit, no robot-only muscle memory, and Elena's old rule: count systems, cut the pulse. He ripped the SIM so no remote call could arm it, traced power leads, red, blue, yellow sloppy solder on the igniter coil. Snip. Pen cap jammed into the striker channel, 2 min 57 sec, 2 min 56. Then dark. Breath escaped his lungs like steam off a round. He muscled the drum outside. On the ball field, 100 children huddled in quilt rows among teachers. Sirens wailed as volunteer engines pulled up. Veteran riders ringed the block on idling Harleys. Arya raced across wet grass, notebook flapping. "She knew," she panted, thrusting a crayon map at him, an aerial of Ridge Hollow with a star on the school, arrows east toward an abandoned service road. Beneath, precise latitude-longitude to the 4th decimal. Coordinates. Elena had once drilled into her handlers, likely ambush spurs. Arya tapped her temple, then Cale's snout. "Dream," she signed. "Mom showed. Diesel knew." Gabriel barked to Hank Jordan. "Take 2 Riders Old Quarry Service Road. Secondary cell." Black bikes roared off. Firefighters secured the bomb. Cale sank onto his haunches, chest heaving. The reopened wound under fresh bandage seeped red. Arya knelt, palms on his cheeks, whispering thanks only the dog could hear. Across the lot, a distant column of smoke billowed Hank's flare. War for Ridge Hollow wasn't over, but the first fuse had failed. Midnight found Gabriel in the living room glow of every lamp he owned, as if light alone could keep memories from ambushing. Elena's walnut service box lay open on the coffee table, ribbons regimented like silent judges. He plucked her K9 Valor Cross, squeezed until ribs of metal carved crescents into his palm. Images overlapped: rusted drum bomb, Cale half limping, Ezra screaming morphine in another country. Rage blurred them together. "Why did you leave them?" he snarled, unsure whether he meant Ezra, the children, or Elena. The metal flew thudding against drywall. Cale lifted his head from his bed, ears tilted not in fear, but assessment. Gabriel tore loose the meritorious service ribbon, slammed it to the table hard enough to split wood. He snatched the silver star when small, socked feet padded in. Arya, dwarfed by his old army sweater, stood in the doorway, watching the storm gather. "Back to bed," he rasped. She stayed. Cale rose, limp understated, and retrieved the flung medal of valor. He laid it in Gabriel's lap, muzzle hovering with quiet insistence. "Remember who you are." The fuse burned out in Gabriel's chest. The metal slid from his fingers. A raw sob cracked him open. Arya moved in, wrapping thin arms around his torso. Cale draped his head across both backs like a weighted blanket. 3 shapes trembled into one. Minutes passed. When breath finally evened, Gabriel whispered, "I can't save everyone." His daughter answered by pressing his hand to her own heartbeat. "It's just noise," she said, the phrase he'd once used to describe distant gunfire. "Mom still talks." Together they reset the medals in velvet grooves, closing the lid as though sealing a treaty with ghosts. Cale curled at their feet once more, eyelids finally heavy. In the hush, rage cooled into resolve. "Bridge still stands," Arya reminded him. "It does," Gabriel agreed, the words tasting like promise instead of penance. Sunday dawn painted Ridge Hollow Elementary in pale gold. Crime scene tape fluttered, but the parking lot already teemed. Pickups unloading plywood, bikers hauling 5-gallon paint buckets, retirees carrying thermoses of coffee. Sheriff Roberts let the tide roll, no orders needed. Gabriel's truck arrived last, ladders rattling in the bed. Cale stepped down gingerly to a spontaneous cheer. Arya carried a canvas tote and a face still shadowed by lack of sleep, but lit with purpose. "We finished the bridge," she murmured. Tom Mason, whose hardware store still bore scorch marks from the Vulture's first raid, distributed rollers. Veterans formed a human assembly line: boards, drills, screws, the same choreography they'd used to raise HESCO barriers in deserts overseas. Teens taped tarps. Serena Knox, now an English teacher, coached brush technique like battlefield radio calls. Mothers set up a snack table: cider, PB&Js, boxes of fresh crayons, just in case the artist run dry. By noon, the west wall, charred black Friday night, was sanded smooth. Eli, paint-flecked, unrolled a butcher paper sketch: pine ridges, open textbooks, a motorcycle silhouette and a poised German shepherd. Above it, block capitals, protected by loyalty. Color bloomed. Veterans filled mountain bases. Art students edged Cale's form. teachers dotted stars above a kindergarten silhouette. Paint smell mixed with sawdust and hope. K.L. patrolled slowly, accepting head scratches, nudging toddlers away from power tools. When the last fill stroke dried, Arya produced her tote, a jar of Crimson Kael's diluted blood, saved from last night's bandage rinse. She pressed a paw-shaped sponge into it. On the mural, beneath SFC Elena Reyes, she stamped a perfect red paw print alive pigment, sealing a memory into brick. Silence rippled outward, reverent. Cale sniffed his own mark, woofed once in solemn approval. Applause burst like fireworks. Defenses followed art. Hank handed out walkie-talkies. Serena's seniors rehearsed call signs. Fathers welded angle iron over door hinges. Even fifth-graders chalked new hopscotch grids around the building perimeter markers in neon pastels. Community turned sabotage site into fort. At 1500 hours, the riders roared back from their sweep. Gabriel climbed a bench, helmet under arm. "Steel vultures think fear owns the night," he told the crowd. "They forgot daytime belongs to people who show up." He gestured at the mural. "They burn, we build. Every brushstroke here is a brick they can't pull loose." Cheers rattled the taped windows. Cale lay down beside Arya, metal glinting in afternoon sun, ears rotating but body finally at ease. She opened her notebook, sketched the day bikes lined like sentinels, fresh paint drying, townsfolk laughing. Over distant hills she penciled faint coordinates, the next watch points. Sheriff Roberts joined Gabriel. "Kids'll remember this," he said softly. "The dog who guarded their stage." "And the town that guarded the dog," Gabriel answered. The sun dipped, stretching long shadows, of repaired desks stacked by the entrance, of patch-welded doors, of a shepherd dozing while a child's hand nestled in his fur. Wind carried the tang of fresh paint and wood smoke, but fear had no footing here. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Rafe Maddox fumed at another lost strike, unaware the fiercest weapon forged this day wasn't plywood or pistols, but a living covenant. Father, daughter, dog, and the stubborn will of Ridge Hollow to hold the bridge, any bridge, against whatever night tried next. Blue sky draped the town like a forgiving flag. Stars and stripes forever rang off freshly painted brick as kids waved banners and shopkeepers tossed taffy. Up front, the veteran's Jeep rolled past the new mural, "Protected by Loyalty," its headlights glinting off wet paint. Gabriel Collins paced beside the Jeep, cap low, gaze ticking across rooftops. Cale trotted at his knee, service vest sporting a crimson paw patch over fresh bandages. The crowd roared for the hero dog, but his ears kept swiveling for trouble. Behind them, Arya sat cross-legged on a flatbed decked like a garden, sprinkling petals with first-graders around a poster that read, "Thank you, Cale." At 11:07, the marching band's cadence doubled, cymbals crashing loud enough to hide 3 motorcycles sliding from a side street. The riders wore carnival paint, but the lead pair's eyes were flint. Rafe Maddox lifted a gloved hand. His partner raised a matte black device, an outlawed ultrasonic canine whistle. The silent blast stabbed Cale's nerves. He froze, pupils blown wide, muscles buckling. Gabriel spun too late. Rafe vaulted over parade barricades, yanked Arya off the float and into a black van that screeched from an alley. Hay bale barriers exploded, confetti scattered like startled birds. Cale collapsed, trembling. Sirens screamed across the square as deputies called a lockdown. Gabriel knelt, hands useless against the seizure ripping through the dog. "Breathe, soldier!" The tremors ebbed. Cale whimpered an apology. Sheriff Roberts sprinted up. "Roadblocks on the east exit and Quarry Road." Gabriel heard only the ringing echo of that whistle. He rose, voice low and lethal. "He took my daughter, Tom." K.L. staggered upright. Gabriel stroked him behind the ears. "Not your fault. We get her back." Hank Jordan's veteran riders formed a wedge of rumbling Harleys. "Give the word." Gabriel slammed a fist into the Jeep hood, denting steel, then drew a ragged breath. "Lock the town. Half the riders secure civilians, half ride with me. Sheriff patch me to dispatch and Cruz's Satlink." As Hank's spare bike idled, Kyle jumped into the sidecar. Gabriel keyed the mic. "Operation Bridgekeeper live. Black van, no rear windows, heading Quarry or Old Mill. Recover hostages only. Confirm." Radios crackled. "Copy, Bridgekeeper." Engines howled east, confetti drifting onto an empty street, the bright remnants of innocence settling into fresh tire scars. Rusted grain hoppers towered like cathedral pillars inside an abandoned silo reeking of mold and diesel. Aria sat zip-tied on a pallet beneath a single buzzing shop light, two bikers, Snake and Grinder, guarding her. She didn't cry. Instead, she moved a scrap of parade crayon through a precise pattern. Tap-tap, sweep left, circle. On a ridge half a mile away, Diesel watched the thermal feed from a hidden drone. The hand signal, drilled years ago by Aria's mother, Elena, translated to Kale as "Stand by, flank left, scan." Diesel clipped the clip into a 30-second video and fired it to Gabriel's sat phone. Mid-chase gravel sprayed as Gabriel braked. Kale's ears pricked at the looping clip. Recognition pierced the fog of pain. He leapt from the sidecar, nose to the wind. Gabriel barked, "Follow the dog!" Riders thundered after him into the scrub. Inside the silo, Diesel's drone speaker whispered Elena's emergency override code. "K9 Victor Echo 3, priority Omega, eyes on Guardian." Aria's gaze rose to the rafters. Kale, miles out, froze instinct, detonating. He rocketed through chaparral, veterans hard on his heels. Snake finally noticed Aria's motion. "Weird autistic tick," he muttered. The drone dived. Grinder's pistol barked wild off the ceiling. Diesel thundered through the speaker. "K9, engage!" Kale crashed through a rusted side door, disarming Grinder in one brutal lunge. Snake grabbed a knife. Aria rolled away. Kale positioned between them as Gabriel and riders stormed in. Within heartbeats, both bikers were zip-tied with their own restraints. Gabriel sliced Aria's cuffs and crushed her to his chest. Kale edged close. Aria ruffled his fur. "Good soldier." Diesel's drone slipped back through the roof, mission logged. Outside, sirens converged while dawn spilled over town murals. Aria traced a final circle on Kale's neck, a signal complete. Kale should have been resting under IV antibiotics, but breaking news on the vet clinic TV, suspect Rafe Maddox heading toward Guardian storage, sent his heart rate spiking. Two body slams popped the kennel latch. IV line snapped. Paw steps echoed down linoleum until he nosed the crash bar and vanished into daylight. In Hank's barn command post, Diesel traced Maddox's likely fallback. The abandoned warehouse yard at Guardian storage, a natural kill box. Aria, wrapped in a blanket, pointed to a camera-dead ghost lane Elena once mapped. Flanking teams assembled, Hank north, Serena south, Sheriff roadblocks beyond. A bark outside turned heads. Kale, leg bleeding through fresh stitches, eyes locked on Aria. She ran to him, pressed a printout of her signal into Gabriel's hand. "He follows the bridge," she whispered. Gabriel hugged her long, then swung onto his Harley. Diesel climbed into the sidecar with a jammer-rigged laptop. Engines thundered toward rusted steel cliffs. Inside the central hangar, Rafe wired propane tanks, plotting to scorch his legend across local headlines. He'd even dragged his paralyzed brother Ezra as leverage. Handing Ezra a detonator, he snarled, "We burn the myth together." Ezra whispered, "This isn't justice." But Rafe stalked away. Silence fell. Then one bark. Cale shot across gravel. Gabriel's voice boomed, "Maddox, warehouse surrounded. Release your brother, surrender." Rafe smirked, thumb poised on the detonator. Outside, Diesel spiked his jammer. Rafe pressed nothing. Rage twisting his face, he drew a flare gun toward a petrol barrel. Cale launched, locking on his wrist. The flare skittered harmlessly off a beam as Gabriel tackled him. Serena snipped the last propane wire with 3 seconds left. Riders cuffed the vultures. Gabriel freed Ezra from restraints. Ezra's voice broke. "Tell Rafe the desert already took enough." Kyle limped back, blood icing his fur, Elena's printed signal tied to his collar. Gabriel touched their foreheads together. "Bridge stands." As dusk bled orange, Serena reported over radio. "Explosives neutralized, hostage safe, Maddox in custody, no casualties." Diesel, already fading into twilight before badges could question him, lifted a silent salute. Gabriel watched until shadow swallowed his friend, then turned to the first star breaking open the sky. Rafe's fires had failed. Bridges painted on school walls, beating in a father's chest, stitched across a dog's healing flank held fast. The chase was over, but reckoning waited on the horizon, where truth would decide whether to heal or to burn them all. Moonlight sharpened the abandoned lumber mill into a crown of jagged limestone. Hollow Creek crawled black beneath it, swallowing stray starlight. Instead of crickets, the night carried a harsher drone. Rotors idling, magazines slapped home. Rafe Maddox, having slipped the daytime dragnet, had rallied his last vultures here. The place his father once hauled timber. "End a legacy where another began," he'd muttered. Inside the sawhouse, a single bulb swung on frayed wire, throwing restless rings of light over pallet towers. Arya, wrists taped but ankles free, sat on logging chain, cataloging every shadow. Rafe's shaky laugh told her this was final act territory. Beyond half-busted bay doors, veteran riders seeped into the ravine, engines cut to silence. Gabriel belly-crawled to a fallen cedar, thermal binoculars sweeping the yard 8 warm shapes. 2 on catwalk, 3 roaming, 1 by a generator, Rafe inside. And Arya small but steady. Diesel crouched beside him, laptop glowing. "Fuel tanks are wired. He'll torch the mill the second we go loud." "Then we go quiet," Gabriel whispered, keying his throat mic. "All units, knives and dog." Cale waited in brush, stitches straining. Diesel cracked a glass vial of neurodampener and misted it across the dog's muzzle counteragent to the ultrasonic whistle. Gabriel pressed his forehead to Cale's. "Find her. Guard. Wait for green flare." The dog slunk into the dark, nostrils sorting sawdust from fear. Inside, Grinder arm still bandaged from the silo scanned with a nightscope. "Nothing yet." "They'll come," Rafe said, pacing beneath the bulb. He glared at Arya. "He always does." She stared back, fingers behind her back tapping a silent pattern on the chain. Tap, tap, sweep right, point down the code for flank. Wait. Danger below. If Cale was near, he'd feel it. Cale slipped through warped siding, padded along a beam. 2 guards smoked on a catwalk, a muzzle butt to one knee and a shoulder drive to the rail, dropped them wordlessly. He caught Arya's vanilla chalk scent and glided toward the bulb's cone of light. Grinder glimpsed a blur. "Movement!" Rafe spun, gun up, as Kyle landed between pallets, silent but bristling. For one suspended beat, nobody breathed. Rafe shouted, "Shoot him!" Grinder's pistol lifted, but the bulb exploded. Gabriel's green flare punched through a window, flooding the room in eerie emerald. Suppressed fire whispered at the south door. Serena's squad seized the generator and cut power to Rafe's detonator. Cale lunged, jaws twisting Grinder's arm until the pistol clattered away, then bounded to Arya. 2 swift bites shredded her tape. "I knew you'd come," she signed, hands quivering only after the words were done. Cale nudged her behind pallets just as Gabriel vaulted a conveyor. Rafe lunged, dragging Arya by her chain, a pistol against her temple. "Back off or she burns with me!" He fumbled for the detonator clipped to his belt. Diesel slid from shadow, carbine leveled. "Remote's dead tanks are cold." Rafe's eyes went wide, betrayal dawning. He swung at Diesel, but Cale knocked his wrist. The pistol flew. Gabriel crashed into Rafe, driving him into a support beam. Dust rained from the catwalk. Rusthook met Gabriel's cheek. Gabriel answered with an elbow to Rafe's ribs. Cale planted himself between Rafe and Arya, low growl promising finality. Outside, sirens swelled as deputies closed the net. Zip ties clicked. The fight was done. Ezra Maddox, wheelchaired and by deputies, rolled under the broken doorway, eyes mournful. Rafe's rage drained in one bleak exhale. "All I wanted was someone to pay," he rasped. "Pain doesn't keep score," Gabriel said, blood stripe drying down his jaw. "It only multiplies." Paramedics checked Kyle's stitches, miraculously intact. Arya traced slow circles on the dog's shoulder. Diesel handed Gabriel the gutted detonator. "Bridge held," he murmured. Gabriel clasped his forearm. "Stay?" Diesel shook his head. "Gray roads still need walking," then vanished into the tree line like smoke. Riders spray-painted Kyle's paw print inside a shield on an upright beam. Arya added her mother's initials, ER. The dying flare cast those shapes as guardians instead of ghosts. Cruisers were loading the last cuffed vultures when Kyle's ears snapped forward. He padded to a stack of sawdust bags near the generator, circled, sat. Arya signed, "Danger buried." Diesel, halfway to disappearing, returned on instinct. Under sawdust, they uncovered new concrete and a paint can wired to a radio detonator. Rafe, hearing the scrape of trowel on metal, sagged against his cuffs. "Fail-safe. 30-minute timer. Whole hill comes down." Gabriel unsealed the can. Homemade plastique. Timer blinking 0514. 0513. Elena's old bomb school whispers steadied his hands. Green lead cut. White cap line intact. Red backup cut second. Timer froze at 0302. Silence burst like applause. Lungs releasing air nobody knew they held. Sheriff Roberts radioed the all clear. Dawn streaked coral over the ridge. Firefighters hosed diesel slicks from gravel. Serena mustered riders for a perimeter sweep. Diesel shouldered his pack again. Gabriel intercepted him, placing Elena's polished K9 Valor Cross in his palm. "Bridge isn't just ours anymore." Diesel swallowed, pocketed the medal, and disappeared for good. Cale padded to the cruiser. Rafe lifted reddened eyes. The dog rested his chin on the window frame, wordless forgiveness. Ezra wheeled closer, Arya pressing a crayon stub into his hand. "Draw new stories," she whispered. Cale barked softly, sealing the covenant. Gabriel scanned the mill one last time. No beeps, no chemical tang, only wet earth, cedar, and sun. He whistled. Cale hopped into the sidecar. Arya climbed behind her father, arms around his waist. Engines rumbled, convoy rolling toward town. In the mirror, the mill shrank to ruins. Yet in Gabriel's mind, the mural back home, protected by loyalty, shone larger than life. Today it felt less like a boast and more like a vow etched in concrete, tears and paw prints. Because when bridges are built by love and guarded by loyalty, even the deepest scars can light the road to sunrise. The autumn sun slanted through Briar Ridge's high windows, turning the therapy pool a glassy blue-green. Cale, chest deep on the submerged treadmill, moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, the salt water lifting his stitched leg just enough to dull the sting. Each stride sent ripples kissing the tile. The whisper of jets half masked the grunt in his throat when scar tissue stretched. On the dry side of the glass knelt Arya, clipboard braced on skinny knees. No one had asked her to track data, yet she arrived each session with a hand-drawn chart, stopwatch poised in lilac-inked fingers. Every lap earned a click, a neat block of numbers, her way of turning courage into proof the world could hold. When Cale's paw slipped on the final circuit, she tapped 2 fingers against the window, tap, tap, sweep left. Steady, soldier. The dog recalibrated and finished the lap. Dr. Sutton, braced at pool's edge, raised a brow. You're hired. Arya only nodded, a ghost of pride tugging her mouth before the stopwatch clicked again. Across town, rain tapped the roof of the spare bedroom Gabriel had turned into an office. Elena's journals lay in catalogued stacks, their dog-eared pages smelling faintly of sand. On his laptop scrolled rough chapter headings. Kandahar's red dust, 37 lives saved. That, the bridge. She built, the cursor blinked under chapter 13, the day hope howled. The story of Cale's seizure, Arya's hand signals, and a bomb plot unraveled in time. His fingers hovered, reluctant, until he thumbed Elena's last field memo on the recorder. Her laugh crackled through static. If love is a command, loyalty is the echo. The tension in his shoulders eased. The keys began to tap. A single postcard leaned against the desk lamp. No return address, grayscale mountains he couldn't place. In Diesel's block letters, bridge still visible from the gray roads, metal safe. See you on the high ground. D. Diesel had vanished 4 weeks ago. Rumors of NGOs and minefields, but the promise in those 4 lines felt enough. Evenings, long after visiting hours, father and daughter let themselves back into the rehab center. The spare key hidden under a ceramic frog. Hero privilege, the staff joked. They spread mats by the dormant pool, Cale curling between them beneath the soft hum of heat lamps. Gabriel read draft pages. Elena's first meet and greet with a gawky pup named Cale, her crusade to ban ultrasonic whistles. When his voice cracked, Arya finished sentences from memory. The dog's tail thumped in agreement, cadence steady as a metronome. Progress arrived by inches. First 2 laps without a slip, then 3. Resistance bands on a land treadmill, finally a trotting circuit around the rehab yard. On the day Cale made a full loop unassisted, Arya chalked a paw print beside the clinic door and wrote, "Still guarding underneath." Patients in wheelchairs rolled past and smiled at the message. At home, a corkboard grew on the living room wall. Elena's timeline in teal index cards, Gabriel's chapters in gold, Arya's sketches pinned like constellations between. Diesel's postcard sat at the center, its curling corners suggesting wings. Some nights thunder rattled the roof and nightmares pulled Gabriel back to burning sand. He would wake, gasping, only to find Arya seated cross-legged at the footboard, Kael's head heavy in her lap. She'd sign bridge holds until his breathing slowed, then slip beneath the blanket beside him. Healing, he realized, wasn't a finish line but a relay. They carried one another the same way bridge cables share a load. 3 months after Hollow Creek, the town gathered to christen the Elena Reyes Canine Therapy Wing. The new annex smelled of eucalyptus cleaner and fresh paint. Steel beams bore laser-cut paw prints. Gabriel spoke briefly, voice steady now, then watched Arya guide Kael to the ribbon. She snipped it with surgical scissors Dr. Sutton had sterilized just for her. Cameras flashed as Kael pressed a red ink paw onto the plaque. Loyalty heals. When the crowd thinned, the three lingered in the quiet corridor. Gabriel slid a finished manuscript into his backpack. The Bridge Between Us. A Family's War. A Dog's Promise. Arya marked Chapter 13, the page where hope howled back. Outside, leaves turned copper. Kael lifted his nose to the breeze, then barked once time to walk. They followed into the chill dusk, steps falling into instinctive cadence. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a motorcycle engine hummed, carrying Diesel toward whatever high ground waited. By late September, the one-wing annex had bloomed into a full-fledged Elena Reyes K-9 Center, a modern low-slung structure of river stone and cedar on the edge of Ridge Hollows Park. Sun struck its steel entry arch, where an overhead banner proclaimed, "Where loyalty lives, healing begins." Inside, one hallway echoed with playful barks, labs wagging at toddlers, a stoic Doberman resting his head in a Marine's trembling hand, shepherd pups skittering over polished floors. Across the atrium, pastel quiet rooms offered weighted blankets and noise-canceling headphones. At the heart stood a circular fountain murmuring around a bronze sculpture, German shepherd beside a young girl, both gazing toward an unseen horizon. The base read, "Elena's Watch." By 10 a.m., the lobby hummed with townsfolk, therapists, veterans, and reporters. Kael sat between Gabriel and Arya, crimson paw patch gleaming. Dr. Sutton opened with a simple truth. 3 months ago, we almost lost everything. Today, we seed something meant to outlive us. Speakers followed, but the room leaned forward only when Gabriel stepped to the mic. "My wife believed dogs translate courage into a language pain can understand," he said, voice steady but warm. "She proved it. 97 missions, 37 lives. Today we pass her dialect on." He closed with, "Some bridges are built of steel, ours of fur and trust. Welcome across." Applause rolled like surf. Then Arya pressed a remote. A curtain whisked aside to reveal her chalk mural reproduced on ceramic tile. Kael leading children and veterans over a vivid bridge, Elena's silhouette radiant on the far bank, arms open wide. Underneath, "Bridges are for all who dare cross." The lobby fell sacred silent as Arya approached the microphone alone. Kael planted himself behind her right shoulder, sentinel and anchor. She drew breath. "Thank you for giving my mom a forever home," she said. 8 words, unbroken, the first public sentence since her mother's funeral. The hush deepened. She continued, each syllable careful. "These dogs hear what we feel. Let them listen." Kael barked once, proud punctuation. The wave of applause that followed lifted the rafters. Gabriel's knees nearly buckled with it. After the ribbon dropped, Kyl's paw triggering a pneumatic scissor rail, the first therapy matches began. A Marine's hand stilled against golden retriever fur. A non-verbal boy's shy smile inched out while tracing a Doberman's shoulder. Amid the bustle, Gabriel glimpsed motion outside the glass doors. Diesel, helmet tucked under one arm, denim jacket catching sun. Their eyes met. Diesel touched the K9 Valor Cross at his collar, saluted two-fingered, and swung onto a dual sport bike, dust spiraling like a signature. Gabriel let him go. Gray roads still needed what Diesel carried. Autumn deepened. Ridge Hollow's nights grew brisk. On the corner of Maple and Liberty stood Mason's Hardware, once charred black, now hidden behind a drop cloth 2 stories high. Edison bulbs looped overhead, soft halos bathing folding chairs filled with families bundled in quilted coats. Cale lay at the podium's base, no longer coiled for war, but a watchful elder whose calm steadied the crowd. Gabriel faced the microphone. "We thought we were covering scars," he told them, "but we were priming canvas for stories." He gestured to the veiled facade. "Tonight we add one more." He yielded the cord to Arya, teal jacket speckled with paint. Teenagers from the high school art club hovered nearby, flecks of color on their hands. Sheriff Roberts leaned on his cane, hat in hand. Arya met Kyle's gaze. 2 tail thumps, their private semaphore of courage. She tugged. The cloth cascaded, revealing a blaze of color that stole the breath from the street. Elena towered at center in sienna strokes, sleeve rolled, one hand on adolescent Kyle's head, the other extended toward a chalk-dust-cheeked Arya. Gabriel appeared beside them, not in uniform, but in a rider's jacket, gaze lifted beyond painted peaks that morphed into a suspension bridge silhouette. At the base, ivory letters ringed with crimson paw prints declared, "Where loyalty lives, healing begins." Silence held, a fragile glass, then shattered into cheers, sobs, and phone flashes. Kyle padded forward, stretched out beneath his younger painted self, chin on paws. Children formed a semicircle around him, softer clapping as if honoring a living monument. Gabriel cleared a thickness from his throat. Every brushstroke was laid by someone who refused to let fear write the last line, he said, thanking students, veterans, donors. He stepped back for Arya. Moonlight glinted off the tiny bridge barrette in her hair. She spoke without the mic, voice intimate yet carrying. "Mom helped dogs understand people. Tonight, we help people remember Mom." She knelt, pressed her palm to Kyle's shoulder, and whispered, "Safe." The dog lifted his head, loosed a single bark that echoed against the brick. Applause built again. Music floated from a Bluetooth speaker, half lullaby, half anthem. Kids chalked sidewalk spirals and stars beneath the mural. Sheriff Roberts stooped to draw a small badge under the paw prints. The art students signed their initials near the bridge silhouette. Gabriel stepped back, taking in the glowing wall, the gathered crowd, the dog resting at the epicenter of a community stitched back together. Moonlight slid across painted peaks, giving the bridge an illusion of motion, an eternal crossing from wound to wisdom. A pickup backfired down the block, heads turned, reflexes primed, but Kyle flicked an ear, assessed, then settled again. Gabriel rubbed behind one velvety ear. "Home, buddy," he murmured. "We're finally home." Arya leaned into him, eyes on her mother's likeness. "She can see it," she said, certainty ringing brighter than the bulbs overhead. Gabriel's vision blurred. He draped an arm around her, and stood anchored by a dog's steady breathing, while Ridge Hollow's night folded over them, not as mourning veil, but as a quilt stitched with trial, triumph, and one enduring truth. Loyalty hadn't merely survived the fires, it had taught them how to heal. A rain-scented Saturday carried Gabriel to Elena's old footlocker, hunting the unit patch Aria hoped to frame beside the mural. Beneath its false bottom, he found an ivory envelope, edges browned like autumn leaves. In Elena's firm block script, "For Aria, when she can hear my silence." He took it to the hearth, where Aria sketched paw prints turning into bridges, and Kyle dozed under the flicker of blue-amber flames. Kneeling, he offered the envelope. Aria cradled it, as if the paper itself might shatter, waiting for his nod before sliding a thumb beneath the wax and embossed bridge naturally. Elena's handwriting flowed steady. "My brave girl, if you're reading this, you're older than I'll ever see, and that's unfair. But love outruns time. It finds new roots, like Kael finding wind even after a whistle tries to break him. People will hurl noise at your quiet. Silence isn't weakness, it's where loyalty grows roots. Speak when you're ready, the right ones will wait. Press your forehead to Kael whenever the world roars. You'll feel me walking the bridge between you. And when Daddy's shadows grow long, remind him the bridge still stands because he built it with love, not guilt. I'm proud of you, Starlight. Keep building bridges. Teach the world that signals of the soul speak louder than fear. All my sunrises, Mom." Tears jeweled Aria's cheeks, but her smile held. Kael edged closer, chin on her knee. Then, voice trembling but clear, she read the closing paragraph aloud. 6 words followed, soft as cathedral bells. "She's still bridging us." Gabriel folded them into an embrace that felt like exhaling years, fire crackling approval while rain drummed cadence on the roof. The harvest sun poured honey over Ridge Hollow's courthouse square. The afternoon Kael received the town's handmade Medal of Honor, bronze disc, shepherd's profile, tiny bridge arcing rim to rim. He padded in at Gabriel's heel gate, sure again, stitches long gone, fur brushed to copper shine. The crowd rose, applause cresting into a standing roar that rolled off winter coats and veterans' leathers. Sheriff Roberts spoke first. "Today we honor heroism that lingered after the smoke, heroism that walked our streets, sniffed out our nightmares, guarded our children." The mayor lifted the ribbon. At Aria's cue, Kael sat and accepted the medal across his crimson paw patch. Cameras clicked, but the sharpest image lived in silence when the clapping faded. Aria laid her palm between Kael's shoulders, cheek against his ear. "Thank you," she breathed, audible only to him. A hush rippled outward, veterans blinking away grit no wind had raised. Gabriel saluted slowly over his heart. Riders, deputies, townsfolk followed until the whole square stood in wordless tribute while church bells tolled twice. Kyle rose, medal glinting, to walk a gentle circuit. Children stretched tentative fingers. He distributed calm in soft snuffles. Before leaving, he paused at the mural, painted Elena, younger Kael, and a bridge of twilight purples. Gabriel guided the shiny disk until its reflection merged with Elena's likeness, a heartbeat of past meeting present. Then Dr. Sutton produced a tug toy bearing the K9 Center's emblem. Kael trotted toward the civic hall, laughter trailing like confetti. Gabriel lingered to watch Aria bridge barrette catching late sun, follow her dog inside, medal ringing quiet promise. He inhaled chimney smoke and cider spice, feeling the story between battlefield and town square settle on a comma, not a period. A year later, Mike's Gas and Go smelled of fresh asphalt and cinnamon crullers. The place, once ringed by predatory motorcycles, now carried only the low hum of normal Sunday traffic. Gabriel topped the truck's tank while KL lounged on the island, metal winking over his vest, eyes half-lidded, yet tracking every step. Arya hopped out, clutching mural sketches for the center's next wing, when a minivan coasted to the opposite pump. Staff Sergeant Mallory Grant slid out, tired eyes under a ball cap, and an oversized paw puppy spilled after her, blue service-in-training vest askew. A little girl followed, pink noise-canceling headphones, laminated speech board clacking against her thigh. One leash tug and her shoulders tightened. Arya approached slowly, Kale at heel. She crouched at a respectful distance, letting the puppy Basil choose curiosity. Two fingers tapped the pavement, tap, tap, sweep right, the silent code that had once traveled through drone feed and gun smoke. Basil cocked her head, trying to map the gesture. Kale scraped the concrete with his paw demonstration. Basil imitated, tail a blur. The girl's wide eyes glittered with wonder. Mallory breathed out, "Is this Kale?" Relief and awe braided in her voice. Arya nodded, then asked in sign whether Basil was in training. The girl traced Basil's name tag, gaze flicking from dog to hero shepherd. Arya produced a postcard from her envelope. Kyle silhouetted on a bridge. She wrote in felt pen, tap, tap, sweep, equals calm plus listen, and handed it to the child. Lily traced each letter, then whispered voice, not bored, "Thank you." Mallory's hand flew to her mouth. Kyle lowered himself beside Basil, muzzles touching as though passing on rank. Arya demonstrated a second signal small circle for scan. Basil tottered through the motion, bumping Kyle's flank. Lily laughed, clear and bright. Gabriel, watching, felt legacy slide seamlessly forward. No speeches, no sirens, just courage changing hands at a gas pump. Wind chimes tinkled as Mallory and Lily headed inside for snacks, Lily practicing signs, Basil bounding beside her. Kale rolled onto his side, rare surrender, while Arya scratched the grizzled fur and whispered, "We did it." Gabriel leaned against the truck, soaking in ordinary sounds. Pumps clicking off, children giggling over slushies, the rhythmic tap-tap sweep of fingers teaching new guardians. Sirens would echo somewhere someday, but so would this low hum of wholeness chalk bridges, bronze medals, silent codes alive under open sky. Kael yawned, contentment rumbling through his ribs. He closed his eyes but kept his ears half-cocked, still the sentinel, but finally free to rest among the things he saved. Across the lot, Lily pressed her hand to Basil's vest, just as Arya did to Kale's medal, forging her own beginning. Legacy walked on four paws beneath honeyed light, stitching the day to every sunrise Elena had promised, proving yet again that love outruns time, always finding another traveler to guide across the bridge. In the end, every paw print in our story reminds us that love, when paired with loyalty, can outpace fear and rebuild what flames try to erase. German shepherds like Kyle embody more than disciplined strength. They model compassion in motion, teaching us to guard the vulnerable, lead with patience, and listen to the unspoken signals of the soul. Whether guiding a child through sensory storms or steadying a veteran's restless nights, these animals prove that healing often arrives on four silent feet. Their devotion invites us to celebrate difference, to meet trauma with community, and to believe that even shattered bridges can carry hope when rebuilt with purposeful hands. May we honor that lesson by protecting the creatures who protect us, by rising when our neighbors stumble, and by passing every hard-won signal of courage to the next generation. Where loyalty lives, healing truly begins, and it thrives wherever humans choose to walk alongside their faithful dogs toward brighter roads.